10:30. We have a full agenda today, so to maximize our time, we are going to go ahead and start committee. We will start with bill introductions. Do we have any bill introductions? Senator Dahl.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 23 RS 0302.
Pertaining to?
Gray water and a filterization of it. Every drop matters. It's for new construction, tax credits.
Thank you. Any objection to introducing 0302? Seeing none, we'll make that request. Any other bill introductions? Seeing none, committee, today we are going to have a hearing on SB 47, prohibiting cities and counties from regulating consumer merchandise and auxiliary containers for the consumption, transportation, or protection of consumer merchandise. We do obviously have a lot of conferees, and so we are going to limit so that everyone can be heard. We're going to limit testimony to 3 minutes. Vice Chair Dietrich will give you a 1-minute warning. And at that time when it expires, I apologize in advance, but we will need to keep moving. Committee, we will do questions after all proponent testimony, questions after all opponent testimony. Any questions about the process since this is our first hearing? And conferees, just a hint, please just summarize your testimony. We have copies, we have hard copies of your written testimony so we can follow along. So hit the highlights and emphasize what you want during your oral testimony, please. With that, we will open the hearing for SB 47, and we will start with a briefing from our reviser, Charles.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. I'll be quick because there are many conferees that wish to speak. This bill, Senate Bill 47, may look familiar to you. It's very similar to a bill, Senate Bill 493, that this committee heard last year and that actually passed and was vetoed by the governor. The veto was overridden by the Senate, but not by the House. This bill expands Senate Bill 493 a bit. But like I said, it's fairly similar. So the key part of the bill, if you have the bill up on your computers or in front of you from your packet, is Section 2, subsection A, which prohibits a municipality from adopting or enforcing any ordinance or resolution that restricts, taxes, prohibits, or otherwise regulates the use, disposition, or sale of auxiliary containers or consumer merchandise. So consumer merchandise is new for this year. Auxiliary container was also restricted under the bill last year. If you look at the definition of auxiliary container, that's in subsection A on the first page of the bill. It's the first paragraph, section 1. And it's very similar to the definition of last year's bill. We're adding straw and cutlery to that list of items. If you look at the definition of consumer merchandise, that's on subsection B on the first page of the bill. That, of course, is new. It means merchandise, wares, goods, articles, commodities offered for sale or lease as provided with a sale or lease primarily but not exclusively for personal, family, or household purposes, and includes any auxiliary container used for consuming, carrying, or transporting such merchandise. So a fairly broad definition there. There are some exceptions to the prohibition that this bill enacts. Some of those are the same exceptions that were in the previous bill from last year, including passing or enforcing a general state or general local sales and use tax, restricting the use of glass containers within the municipality based on public safety concerns. A municipality can prohibit littering. A municipality can set reasonable standards for the regulation of alcohol possession as otherwise provided by law. A municipality can operate a recycling, composting, or solid waste disposal program. regulate the use of auxiliary containers on property owned or maintained by the municipality. There are a few new exceptions. Those are 7, 8, and 9 in subsection D on page 2 of the bill. They permit a municipality to regulate consumer merchandise to the extent necessary to comply with local building or fire codes, require the licensing or permitting of a retailer of consumer merchandise, or enact or enforce an ordinance or a resolution that is specifically authorized by state or federal law. And then in addition, subsection D, on the way bottom of the bill, page 2, there is an exception that nothing shall be construed as to prohibit or restrict the zoning authority of municipalities. If enacted, the bill would become effective July 1st, 2024.
Thank you, Charles. Questions for the reviser? Senator Ware.
Thank you, Madam Chair. How does this apply to the idea of home rule?
Well, this would be a uniform bill, so it applies to all cities and counties. You know, for a more detailed answer, I guess I'd have to do some research, but it is intended at least to apply uniformly to all counties and cities.
So it ignores the idea of home rule?
Well, it's, I mean, I guess if you're talking about home rule in a legal sense, that's how I was responding to your question. If you're talking about home rule as a concept or as a policy, I guess I would defer to the conferees to discuss that.
Seeing no other questions, thank you, Charles. We will begin with proponent testimonies. Committee, we do have one small change. Jason Watkins is written only, and Larry Ann Brown will be giving oral testimony. So we'll just make those changes on your agenda. That would be great. First up, we have Eric Stafford, Vice President of Government Affairs from the Kansas Chamber. Welcome to committee, Eric.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, committee members. As stated, Eric Stafford with the Kansas Chamber here in support of Senate Bill 47. We appreciate the opportunity for this hearing and to speak in support of the bill today. As Charles mentioned, this is very similar to Senate Bill 43 that was vetoed, 493 that was vetoed by Governor Kelly last spring. With some changes that we'll go through. So obviously the auxiliary container plastic products defined, I know there'll be some speakers going through that here shortly. Really, this is dealing with home rule as you start dealing with cities and counties banning certain products, whether it's plastic containers or consumer merchandise, that's the new provision in the bill, you're placing businesses at competitive disadvantages to competing businesses that might be outside of city limits and not subject to those restrictions. So if a city passes some ordinance that says we're not going to have plastic straws, plastic cups, plates, forks, whatever, then their competitors don't fall under that and they're not facing those restrictions. So you have the additional costs of finding different products that typically are more expensive than the plastic products today. But two, in the PDF copy, I know you can't click your piece of paper, but in the PDF copy of our testimony, if you want to look at it, there's a Greenpeace report that was Greenpeace USA that was labeled "Plastic Recycling is a Dead-End Street." So you can read through that report as to why plastic recycling is down and really how it's not resulting in any further ending to plastic usage that they were hoping for. But ultimately, the reason on the plastic side is we trust businesses and consumers to determine the markets and let technology and innovation decide what products are best for containing materials and merchandise. Technology always wins, and advancements in technology will drive the innovation and change that consumers want, whether it's electric vehicles or plastic or paper straws. So attached to our testimony, it might be a little outdated. Zach Taylor is going to testify shortly after from the American Recyclable Plastic Bag Alliance. That gives kind of an update on uniformity and where states are on adopting uniform standards dealing with plastics. But more specifically on the consumer merchandise side, this was added. If you look on the third page of our testimony, there's an article from Cake News about the city of Wichita considering the ban of the sale of dogs and cats. So that led our retail council that we have under the chamber, that includes representatives from who own Petland franchises, to say, hey, this is putting our businesses at risk and threatening us having to close our businesses or move our businesses to a city outside of the city of Wichita that is looking to potentially ban this. This is not the role of government in our view. Government should not be banning legal products. Again, let consumers decide where and when they want to purchase and what they want to purchase. Don't put those restrictions in place. And we did try to understand that there are some exceptions that need to take place, whether it's building codes, et cetera. So those are listed in the bill to give local governments some flexibility. But ultimately, we ask that this committee adopt Senate Bill 47 and the changes that we have made from last year. So thank you. Happy to answer questions at the end.
Thank you, Eric. Next, we have Zachary Taylor, Director, American Recyclable Plastic Bag Alliance. Welcome to committee, Zachary.
Good morning, Chair Erickson, Vice Chair Dietrich, Ranking Member Holland. Good to be here in person this year. Glad to be speaking in support of Senate Bill 47. We were here last year in support of Senate Bill 493. ARPBA represents the U.S. manufacturers and recyclers of plastic retail bags. These products are overwhelmingly made across the United States, as opposed to alternative products which are made overseas and imported here. We uniformly oppose local regulation of plastic carryout bags like those under consideration in Lawrence, Wichita, and discussed here in Topeka. 21 states have adopted similar limitations on local government authority to regulate these products. This provides a level playing field for small businesses and businesses of all size who would be undermining their competitive advantage when consumers can simply leave a jurisdiction to find an alternative approach. That can cause lost sales, which can lead to lost jobs. It is expensive. In South Carolina, one business recently reported that switching from plastic bags to alternative bags that would have been allowed under a local limitation would have cost them as much as $250,000 per store per year. In an environment where inflation is over 10% for groceries, those costs will be passed on to struggling families, raising grocery bills even further. It's also disruptive, as I talked about, economies of scale. For small businesses who rely on the ability to purchase products for their entire enterprise, having to switch between various products for various stores disrupts operations. It's also ineffective. We hear a lot of concerns about litter and waste, but the data out there from groups like Keep America Beautiful and the EPA show that plastic bags do not account for meaningful portions of items collected at litter cleanups or the volumes of waste going to landfills. Ultimately, we encourage this committee to support this bill for purposes of consumer protection, business flexibility, a level playing field, and regulatory certainty. You join several other states throughout the region and across the country in making sure that businesses have a clear and understandable regulatory environment that allows them to flourish and grow without unnecessary local regulation that raises costs on families, makes it hard to operate businesses, and ultimately does little to nothing to advance sustainability. Happy to answer any questions at the end.
Thank you very much, Zachary. Appreciate it. Next, we have Kevin Gregg, Executive Director, Fuel True Independent Energy and Convenience. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My testimony is very similar to the previous person, just because we do represent small business, the convenience store industry, and we serve a transient population, both people who are traveling, need paper cups, like styrofoam cups, these auxiliary containers that we're talking about, as well as plastic bags to carry their items out of the store. So when we order by the pallet, by the bale, all of these products, when you take away our flexibility to use them in the entire state or across county lines, across municipalities, that's going to raise our costs just by the disruption of having to order specific products for specific locations. So with that in mind, and then also the transient population that we serve, people who live out of these plastic bags, unfortunately for homeless folks or people who live on the streets, and some of this stuff offers protection to them, unfortunately, but that's just the nature of the business. So we would ask for your support just based on a consistency basis and to help with the consistency of our operations across county lines and municipalities. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Scott Schneider, Kansas Restaurant and Hospitality Association. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Scott Schneider, Legislative Counsel for the Kansas Restaurant and Hospitality Association. Our association has no opinion on whether Mayor Whipple likes puppies or not, but we have testified on this bill multiple years, and I do want to bring one piece of data to your attention, and it's something that Hugh O'Reilly presented last week, and it's the second page of my testimony, and it's basically an inflation chart year over year, in a couple lines that I'd like to point out. So S&E is small wares and equipment. So they're more permanent things, but there is this huge fluctuation that businesses have to decide which direction am I going to go? And then paper and disposable products. You can see the massive inflation that's happened over the time period over the year. It is coming down. I will also point out that there's a chance that some of these companies will actually make money on their Super Bowl wings this year. Poultry's actually coming down back into a more familiar place. But it's these types of decisions that we think should be left to the business, and the government, whether local or even state, is not really in a position to tell us how we should manage our purchases of our inventory. And with that, I'll stand for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next committee, we have Dan Murray, Kansas State Director, National Federation of Independent Business. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dan Murray, representing nearly 4,000 small business owners across the state. My arguments have been made, so I'll stand on my written testimony, but I wanted to stand up and be heard in person to emphasize how important this is for small businesses. They are the ones who are most disproportionately harmed by these types of prohibitions. Buying on scale for small businesses, restricting these kinds of products for them is the most impactful on them. So with that, I will quiet down and stand for questions at the appropriate time. Thank you very much.
Well, I wonder what would have happened if I would have put a 2-minute limit. We would be done at 11. Thank you very much, Dan. And our final proponent is Larry Ann Brown, who is here on behalf of the Wine Institute. Welcome, Larry Ann.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Larry Ann Brown. I'm here today on behalf of the Wine Institute, which is an association of roughly 1,000 California wineries and affiliated businesses. I would just like to draw your attention to my testimony. We have just a couple of amendments that we would like to speak with the original proponents of the bill about. It just has to do with making sure that we're clarifying that fees are also included in what might be included in the list of what the locals could not do. We've got another section that we might want to add the word packaging, and then there's another section we might want to clarify exactly where the local units of government could place restrictions on where glass bottles could be utilized. And with that, I'd be also happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Committee, questions for proponents, and I'm going to ask you to be concise and let the conferees know who you would like to address the question to. Senator Dahl.
Thank you. I'd like to talk to Eric, please.
Hi, Senator.
How you doing?
Good.
You said that the city passing something that's legal, chamber has a problem with. Don't you think that should apply to state government too?
Banning products that are legal?
Right.
Well, and those are the policy decisions to be implemented, yes. And I think in terms of the debate on what's legal or not legal, I think the issue is more along the lines of uniformity, where it might be deemed illegal in one city, but not in a county or other cities. And so it's that, I think it's having a more statewide approach and having those policy determinations. That's one argument, but then having those arguments on a local government by local government, it's the lack of uniformity that's the bigger concern.
Why can't we recycle plastic bags?
This bill doesn't.
Recycle bag, nobody will take recycled plastic bags like Dylan's bags. Why can't we recycle those?
I don't know, I thought we put ours in our recycling bin. Am I admitting guilt here?
We can't in Lawrence and we can in Garden City. I know those two places.
I don't know, that's a local recycling question. Honestly, I don't know the answer to that because I thought they were recyclable. I don't know why, and then they're going to ban them. That makes no sense other than the costs associated with recycling, which, read through that report, you're starting to see that too. So Yeah, it's more the uniformity. Have that policy decision that we want to ban gas-powered lawnmowers at the state level. We can have that policy discussion at the state level versus saying that, you know, Topeka residents can't purchase those, but I can go to North Topeka outside city limits and buy one and use it. You know, it's the lack of uniformity that's the concern.
I believe Zachary Taylor might be able to answer, Senator, your question on recycling of plastic bags. If you would restate your name, please, Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, Zachary Taylor, Director of the American Recyclable Plastic Bag Alliance. Senator, thank you for the question. Plastic bags are recyclable, generally through the store take-back program that retailers operate. So we'd encourage you to check with most grocery stores that distribute plastic bags. You will have a receptacle at the front of the store for you to take them back to. I'd also point out, this morning we saw a story from Leavenworth, Kansas. The transfer station there was encouraging local residents to return their plastic bags and other plastic films there to be recycled into new products like bags. Every plastic bag you get at the grocery store, if it's made by one of our members, has about 10% recycled content in it. We're hard at work to increase the amount of recycled content in those products, so recycling is happening. Does it need more investment? Yes, but we're proud of what we're doing and working hard to make it more convenient and more accessible for consumers across the country.
I'll return to those.
Thank you.
Any other questions for proponents? Senator OShea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a thought, so it's probably for Eric. So what if we added, unless the city or county pays the business back for the extra expense that they incur by going out of their uniform supplies?
Repeat that again so I understand.
Sorry, I know it's kind of too many double
I
negatives.
think I know what you're saying, but I'm going to rephrase
If this, yeah, what if it's like, okay, the cities and counties can choose to do this, but then we're going to require that you pay the small business or whatever business is incurring extra expenses based on the higher regulation?
I would need to confirm with my members, but I'd be interested to see local government's response to that proposal. That costs them money. I would need to get feedback from our folks on that. But again, I would reiterate that it does create the, still would create a climate of ununiform policies that could put one business at a disadvantage compared to another who might be outside of those city limits or in a different county.
Seeing no other questions for the proponents, committee, I will draw your attention to written proponent testimony, again from Jason Watkins from the Wichita Regional Chamber of Commerce, John Monroe, Government Affairs Consult for the Kansas Beverage Association, Randy Stuckey, Senior VP of Government Affairs, Kansas Grain and Feed Association, and Kansas Agribusiness Retailers Association. And so be sure and review that testimony as well. With that, we will move on to opponent testimony, and I am going to apologize in advance if I mispronounce anybody's name. It's not intentional. As a former school teacher, I do my best, but I sometimes get it wrong. We will start with Zach Pastora, Legislative Director and State Lobbyist from the Kansas chapter of Sierra Club. Welcome, Zach.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll start my clock here. And thank you, committee, for the opportunity to present before you on Senate Bill 47. And I want to publicly thank our committee assistant. There's a lot of testimony involved, and thank you for her for getting all that into the record. On behalf of the 5,000 members of the Kansas Sierra Club, we urge you to oppose Senate Bill 47, and for a number of reasons. One, we think it violates the spirit of the Kansas Constitution. We think that communities ought to be decided what's best for their community, and businesses included, and that's been done at the local level where you've had City of Lawrence, City of Wichita have conversations with the business community on ways that they can reduce plastic. And part of their anti-litter strategy is stopping these plastic materials from entering the waste stream in the process. And so we would oppose this state mandate. It's premature. These regulations haven't actually been implemented at the local level. So we're excited to see how that plays out, and so we encourage you to stand by and let that process play out for the local community that desires to do something about our plastic problem. I include some studies in my testimony that show that this is a popular decision for folks to try to reduce the plastic that they see in their community. 2/3 of Wichita residents surveyed agree that we should have a ban or a tax on plastic bags locally. 8 in 10 Americans are concerned with plastics and support state and local solutions. And that's why you'll hear from a number of conferees at the local level thinking that the state's not doing enough to reduce the plastic problem we have. Most of the plastics we find in our communities are made of, of the litter, are plastic-based and coming from the food and beverage industry. So we are open to a dialogue with business interests to try to get something done about this. I give you the opportunity to discuss some amendments, like a task force, like tax credits for businesses that are reducing plastic, and some other ideas to try to get at the real problem here, which is the plastic, and do it in a way that doesn't infringe on local communities' rights. Stand before you for questions. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, Zach. Next, we have Nancy Muma from Lawrence, Kansas. Welcome to committee, Nancy.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Secretary, and members of this Commerce Committee for letting me speak with you today. So my name is Nancy Muma. I'm a PhD in pharmacology and toxicology. I'm a professor at a university here in Kansas. And I'm talking with you about that because I'm an expert in toxicology. And I want to share with you the problems with single-use plastics. They're toxic, okay? They poison all of us. So single-use plastics account for about 40% of plastics that are produced in our country. Plastics produced in our country cause about 232 million tons of CO2 each and every year, about the same as 116 coal-fired power plants. The vast majority of Kansans want us to reduce CO2 production because they know climate change is happening now. These plastics are toxic. When they break down, they go into tiny little pieces, little nanoparticles. These nanoparticles are in the air, they're in the water, and so they're in our bodies. In our bodies, our immune systems try to attack them, to remove them like they would a virus, and that causes inflammation. Inflammation is related to heart disease, arthritis, cancer, depression, anxiety. These things are real problems for the people of Kansas. There's also additives in these plastics, things like BPAs, bisphenols. These things are what we call endocrine disruptors. It disrupts our hormones, our testosterone, our estrogen. I know you gentlemen don't want your testosterone messed with. That's what these endocrine disruptors do. So these are not healthy for people of Kansas. They're even worse for the children and our unborn children. Please consider the health and well-being of the people of Kansas, our children and our unborn children. These things cause disruptions in our reproductive systems. It alters our signaling in our brains and serotonin and dopamine. These are real problems. And to substitute cloth bags for plastic bags is a pretty easy habit to get into. I have some that I've used for 15 years. Throw them in the washing machine, they're clean. You got fresh bags to use for your next shopping trip. We don't need to cause an increased cost to the people who are selling us products. We can bring our own cloth bags. It's a pretty simple way to reduce the toxicity that these plastics expose us to. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Margaret Kramer. Margaret, welcome to committee.
Hello, my name is Margaret Kramer. I sincerely thank all of you for allowing me the opportunity to testify. I stand in opposition to Senate Bill 47. In reading the bill, there is no logic contained in it, because who would want to trash the landscape with plastic litter and kill the oceans? So there must be something operating at a deeper level, besides the usual culprits of short-sightedness and greed, and I believe that is resistance to change. Resistance to change. We are all guilty of it. It's just human nature that we would rather do anything and be subjected to anything rather than make simple, small changes in our daily lifestyles, even if we would benefit from those changes. I mean, if we go to Walmart today and don't bring our reusable bags, and we walk out with 20 plastic bags, we want to be assured that if we shop at Walmart, the same thing will happen tomorrow. I mean, facing an unknown, terrifying future is terrifying for us. Resistance to change. But what if we could put that irrational fear aside and look at the situation objectively? What if Walmart were to realize, can you imagine how much money we would save if we no longer had to supply those millions of plastic bags? If we shifted that cost burden to the consumer? Okay, some, not all customers would initially be upset due again to their resistance to change. But once they saw other people with reusable bags and realized nothing terrible would happen to them if they brought a reusable bag, their anxiety levels would decrease. And there is no validity to the argument that the poor cannot come up with reusable bags. If you volunteer at a food pantry like I have at Just Food in Lawrence, where clients can get extra food points for bringing in reusable bags, they all have them. Okay, so the last thing I want to say is let's broaden our scope to include every plastic takeout container and utensil that we can possibly think of. What if the businesses shifted that cost to the consumer? I mean, yes, there would have to be some standardization. You can't go up to a drive-in window and hand them a flimsy paper bag for 10 pounds of food. But those containers already exist. And think of the money that people could make by distributing and selling such bags. Europe has already gone very far in totally eliminating disposable plastic. We can too. There is no scientific reason preventing us from doing so. Thank you. Save money, businesses. Shift the burden to the consumer. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Oh, perfect timing. That was very good. Next committee, we have Jennifer Connelly. Hi, Jennifer. Welcome to committee.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to talk about something. I used to run an Airbnb. I had 12 acres of land and ran it for 3.5 years, and I had some really exciting guests, and I discovered that what diverse industry we have in our travel industry. For instance, well, they didn't stay. One of the things that I didn't put on here, I had some people that were going down to Texas to hunt a wild boar because it's a problem there. So I had some burly guys come through, and one of my most interesting was one of my favorite states was a field crew of duck hunters that came through Kansas, and they go all over the U.S., and they just film duck hunting. So they left me duck meat and a really good set of steak, or just kitchen knives, a whole set. It was very nice. But they were just kind of goofy guys. And it's amazing how our state depends on hunting and fishing for a tourist trade. We want to be remembered for our pristine streams, our beautiful outdoor areas. Wildlife conservation and tourist revenues depend highly on our hunting and fishing. I'm sure you'll hear testimony, whether you've got it today or later, about plastic pollution, how cities spend thousands upon thousands of dollars to unclog their wastewater treatment facilities that are inundated with plastic bags. I'm sure you'll hear about the costs associated with plastic pollution for our cities. I want to emphasize something different, though, more about a different cost. I want to talk about a cost that's not easily noticed. When we pollute our waterways and our outdoor areas, we are downgrading a valuable asset. We want our tourists to remember this beautiful state. We want them to come back again and again. And by the way, I quit running the Airbnb, but those duck hunters would have been back. So let our communities decide for themselves how they want to regard plastic pollution and any other kind of pollution. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for being here. Next, we have Jay Hall, Legislative Policy Director and General Counsel, Kansas Association of Counties. Welcome, Jay.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Jay Hall, Deputy Director, General Counsel for the Kansas Association of Counties. I'm not here today to argue about whether or not plastic bags should be, in fact, banned or regulated at the local level. What I'm arguing about is whether or not the state should take away the ability for our local municipalities, our local counties, to make that decision locally. The Kansas Association of Counties always stands against preemption because that takes away local control. Local control is important. The members of the community are closer to their county commissioners because those are their neighbors. Those are the people that they see at their local high school football games, at their local grocery stores, at their community events. And those are the people that they can get in touch with if they want decisions to be made at a local level. Senate Bill 47 takes the ability for local counties to make decisions about how they want to handle plastic waste away from those local communities. And that's something that we would oppose. I'd also point out that counties are responsible for making a solid waste plan. And Senate Bill 47 removes a tool that counties can use in making a solid waste plan from them. Now, I'm not going to say that counties should regulate plastic waste in this way or in any way. That's not the decision that the Kansas Association of Counties is here to make. That's a decision that is best made locally, and we would encourage the committee, therefore, to reject this bill and allow that decision to be made at the local level. I'd stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Jay. Next, we have Reverend Thad Holcomb on behalf of Lawrence Ecology Teams United in Sustainability. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it. I am Thad Holcomb. I moderate the LETUS, the Lawrence Ecology Teams United for Sustainability. I want to say a little bit about who I'm representing. I'm representing 9 different green teams from different faith communities that are Protestant, Catholic, Jewish, Muslim, Unitarian Universalist, and Buddhist. These faith communities in Lawrence have approximately over 2,500 members, if not more. And they're also diverse just like the faiths are. They're Democrats, they're Republicans, and they're independents. And they have high percentages in voting. They are, though, as complicit as I am in being prone to convenience addiction. That is, using plastic bags when you go to the grocery store. And they also experience the difficulty of moving away from this addiction like any of us do as far as addiction. Similar to the one I had in finally quitting smoking. What we want to do is switch from this bag here, our addiction, to get a new addiction, this addiction. So where we carry this always with us when we go, and several of them in our car, and that removes that problem. You know, we do not want to hear any more about plastic bags floating like balloons over the county dump, and that's what's happening. And then they land on the pastures and the areas outside, or clogging up recycling machines and not continuing to poison the creeks and the rivers, harming humans and wildlife. We don't want to hear that. It's for these reasons and more that we are advocating, along with other groups and individuals, to have an ordinance to limit single-use plastic bags being used and then having them becomes trash, since most of them are not recycled. And so we support our city commission in advocating this. The citizens of Lawrence have spoken through their elected representatives in the city. It's an overreach of the state to then decide that we, voting citizens, have been mistaken. It's an ethical concern to us. It is infringement on the process of democracy and a violation of our advocating that the earth is not to be used as a trash receptacle. We ask that this legislation be denied. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here and for your testimony. Our last opponent is Rabbi Motti Rieber from Interfaith Action. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Rabbi Motti Rieber, Kansas Interfaith Action, representing several of the mainline denominations and hundreds of individual members of faith communities throughout the state. I'm here to oppose SB 47, which some wags have called the Plastic Bill of Rights. The denominations and faith communities of Kansas Interfaith Action take as the very core of our mission, care of God's creation. So my testimony is in three pieces. First is, single-use plastic is an environmental problem. It's energy intensive to produce, and it's difficult to dispose of. It really is not recyclable, and plastic containers don't biodegrade. Cities are already having to deal with a solid waste problem from plastic bags. They're already paying for that. So the idea that cities are inflicting some kind of cost on consumers are already paying that through their taxes, that the counties and cities are dealing with the solid waste issue. The second one, Jay already spoke to very eloquently, which is local control. The idea that home rule is a core constitutional element of our government, and that communities should decide what's right for them, and that the legislature is all too willing and eager to overrule or preempt counties when moneyed interests want them to do so. It's too easy to do, it's too readily done, and we should stop doing it. And the third one is, it's really very difficult for Kansas to develop environmental policy. There's no committee that deals with it. There's no means to deal with it. We're in this committee, the Commerce Committee today. There's ag committees, there's utilities committees. There's no way to have a conversation about this in a comprehensive way. So when citizens in their communities come together to do the hard work of bringing to their county commission a resolution or a decision to address this pressing issue, industry runs to the legislature to get them to stop it. That's not an appropriate use of the legislature's power. It's anti-democratic as well as anti-environmental. Senators, the right of people to a livable planet and to advocate for meaningful change is much more important than the inexpensive convenience of the restaurant or convenience store industry. I urge you to vote against SB 47, and I'll take questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you very much. Committee questions for the opponents. Again, please be concise and direct it to whichever conferee you would like to answer. Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This would be for Mr. Hall with the Association of Counties. I really thought, Mr. Hall, someone else would ask this, but the chair was looking around like no questions at all, so I thought I would ask you. The question that Senator OShea asked as it relates to if the local units of government were to pay businesses for their increased cost of any type of restriction on ancillary containers, what would be your thought? Do you think that local units of government, and I realize you represent the counties, you can't speak for the cities, but...
I'll speak on behalf of the counties and say that essentially counties would end up paying twice at that point, because they would end up paying the businesses for the change, but then they would also be paying for the whatever trash type of collection they would be doing, because again, counties are responsible for solid waste planning.
So you're basically, if I'm understanding right, saying that you don't think that's a viable option?
I don't think that that's a viable option, simply because, again, they'd be paying twice. So taxpayers would essentially be paying for the same thing 2 times to the county.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Senator Ware.
Thank you also for you. Thank you. Wouldn't eliminating at least a portion of the enormous amount of plastic that goes into our landfills, or whatever the method might be to dispose of it, wouldn't eliminating that reduce the cost so that there's a chance that it could come out to be a wash?
There might be a possibility that it'd come out as a wash. Without having done the research, I don't want to say that it would come out as a wash, because I might be wrong.
Senator Schallenberger.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I have a question. I don't know who it's for, so maybe the staff could answer. It might be easier. Single-use plastic, is that defined as more than a Walmart bag? And my question is this, the trash liners that line my trash can, is that a single-use bag? It's used one time, you throw it in the landfill?
Charles?
Thank you, Chairman. So this particular bill does not discuss single use. There was another bill, I think maybe last year or the year before, that talked about single-use bags. But in this bill, we just have the definition of auxiliary container in Section 1, subsection A, and then also the definition of consumer merchandise in subsection B of Section 1. And those are the items, the things that are that regulation is prohibited, would be prohibited with this bill.
So what we're trying to do is prohibit a prohibition. The legislature wants to prohibit somebody else from prohibiting something. I'm sitting here looking at these handy wipes that are wrapped up in a piece of plastic, and that, I suppose the city could eliminate that unless we prohibit that. Is that correct?
Charles?
Yeah, so I guess I would just have to refer you to the definition of auxiliary container, and it's, you know, it's in lines 10 through 12 of the first page of the bill. Made of cloth, paper, plastic, foam plastic, expanded plastic, cardboard, corrugated material, aluminum, glass, post-consumer recycled.
So the legislature, okay. Thank you.
Senator, I will say that, and I am not asking for any more Twizzlers to be delivered to my office, thank you. But this point was made in that, you know, I like Twizzlers, they come in a plastic bag, and that could potentially fall under this as well. So any other questions for the opponents? Seeing none, committee, I will draw your attention to the written testimony. We have quite a list of written in opposition. Lori Lawrence, Teresa Wilk, Stuart Little, Spencer Duncan, Kathy Richardson, Ellen Bowman, Jesse Moore, Kent Rowe, Jane Burns, Tad Kramer, Felix Rebello, Michael Allman, Melinda Lewis, Michael Koss, Bruce Blank, Rebecca Wolf, Alice Beam, Elizabeth Carson, Anthony Schmidt, Joseph Madden, Elizabeth Bishop, and John Shively. We also received one neutral written only from Carrie Rinker, so I encourage you to look over all of that testimony as well. I want to thank everyone for participating today and being respectful of time and each other. Seeing no other business before the committee,